So you're thinking about moving to Charlotte, North Carolina? Well, in today's episode, I'm going to show you just how much it costs to live right here in the Queen City. Stick around to the end because I'm also going to take you to my local supermarket so you can get a glimpse of how much it costs to buy staples here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Welcome to my channel. My name is Yadi Karina Jones, and I'm a real estate agent with Keller Williams Select right here in the Charlotte metro area. Every day I help people just like you buy, sell, invest, and relocate to this beautiful city. But if you're still on the fence, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel so that you can get the information you need to make the decisions that are important for you and your family. Now, let's find out what it costs to live in the Queen City, and let's do it right now. A high cost of living is going to be one of the biggest deterrents to saving more and spending less. As a matter of fact, one of the things that attracted us the most to Charlotte, North Carolina was the reduced cost of living that we experienced when we moved from New York City to the Queen City. Now, I do realize that cost of living is going to be relative to wherever you are moving from. And there are two factors that are going to heavily weigh in on the cost of living. And one of those is the national average cost of living, which is set at the number 100. And the other is the expenses that we all experience. And those include things like housing, utilities, healthcare, transportation, groceries, property taxes, and miscellaneous. Now today I'm going to be talking about all of those except for miscellaneous, just because miscellaneous is super subjective. It involves things like vet services, clothing, entertainment, and that's all contingent on how you choose to live your life. So we're going to keep that one off of the table. Every statistic that I'm going to share is going to be based on bestplaces.net and Forbes.com, and every so often I'm going to intercept with some real life examples when I can. Now, the overall cost of living index of Charlotte is 99.7, as you can see on this table. Now, most of the things in Charlotte run about 99, so we are extremely close to the national average cost of living, but we are still below that 100 number. None of these percentages make any sense until you actually put some numbers to it. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to break this down into dollars and cents so that it actually makes sense. The first expense we're going to talk about is housing, and that's just because it's typically the biggest expense that we have every month. In all fairness, I wanted to compare Charlotte to a city that was less expensive, so I selected Oklahoma City, and to a city that was more expensive, so I selected Boston. Now, we can tell right from this table that it is significantly more expensive to purchase a property in Boston versus Oklahoma City or Charlotte. In fact, it costs 59% more to purchase a home in Boston than it does in Charlotte. Now, let's look at the rents. It is also telling the same story. It is 59% more expensive to rent an apartment in Boston than it is to rent one in Charlotte. But now when we look at Oklahoma City, it is much less expensive to rent an apartment there. But if you are coming to Charlotte with the thought process of purchasing a home, there's really only a gap of 12% between Oklahoma City and Charlotte. Meanwhile, 59% between Charlotte and Boston. The next category we're going to talk about is utilities, and utilities are going to involve things like electricity, gas, and your phone usage. Now you can see right from the table that when it comes to these three cities, they're relatively moving in that same plane when it comes to phone usage. But where you see the real difference is in the energy cost. And Charlotte is coming in slightly lower than both Oklahoma City, but a lot lower than Boston. In fact, Charlotte is 38% less expensive in energy costs than Boston. And for good reason, because Boston has very cold winters. As a matter of fact, it doesn't really get below 21 degrees in Charlotte, but in Boston, they see temperatures of 0 and sometimes below 0. So you're going to have to crank that heat up so you don't freeze your little toes and fingers to death up there. And that's part of the reason why Boston is going to have higher energy costs than Charlotte. When it comes to healthcare, we can see that it is much more expensive to visit the doctor in Boston and slightly more expensive to visit the dentist in Boston than it is in Charlotte. But when it comes to the optometrist, I'm not quite sure what's happening, but clearly we are expensive in that category. Now, our only saving grace is that our ibuprofen is a lot less expensive here than it is in both of those cities. Now, for my family in particular, our healthcare costs went up when we moved to Charlotte, and that's because my husband was a union employee in New York City, but he's not a union employee here. So my suggestion is that if you are making a move from your city to Charlotte, to pay careful attention to the benefits package that you're being given to make sure it's apples to apples with what you had, especially if you use your healthcare services quite often. When it comes to property taxes, Charlotte is slightly above the national average of 0.99%. Charlotte is actually at 1.03%, and Boston is at 1.07%, which means that if you purchased a home in Charlotte for $400,000, you would be paying about $4,100 in property taxes. In Boston, you would pay about $160 more than you would in Charlotte. And in Oklahoma City, you would pay about $300 less than you would in Charlotte. But I have something for you that trumps all of that. I am from New York City, as most of you know, and the property taxes over there can get as high as 2.3%, which means that there are people in places like Suffolk County that are paying over $25,000 a year in property taxes. So you can rest assured that you are getting a good deal by living in Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, the other thing is that if you do decide to move to Charlotte, North Carolina, there are other counties that are far less expensive than Charlotte, such as Union County and Cleveland County. So those are two counties to consider. And you can see from this table the differences between what Charlotte charges and what those counties charge. So that's good news as well. So we've come to my favorite section, food. Now, you can tell from the table that it is more expensive to purchase milk, bread, and eggs from Boston than it is from Charlotte. But these prices are not at all reflective of what it costs to purchase any of those things. As a matter of fact, I don't think I have to tell you how groceries have skyrocketed in the last couple of months. So I actually took a shopping trip so that I could tell you specifically what it costs to purchase these three items here in my local supermarket. Now, I did select Harris Teeter, which is somewhere in the middle. It's not quite as expensive as Whole Foods, but it's not as inexpensive as a place like Food Lion or Aldi or Lidl or something like that. So for me, I purchased a certain kind of bread. So, okay, I did go a little over on bread because I like this bread for my French toast. And that was $4.99. However, there was another bread that I could have picked up, and that one would have been $3.50. So they are actually correct on bread. So relatively, bread is about the price that Forbes.com gave us. Now, when it comes to milk, I spent $3.29 on a gallon of milk. And when it came to eggs, and we all know that eggs are super expensive right now. I don't know what's happening, but eggs were $5.39. So it is not as inexpensive as you see on this chart, but it is less expensive than Boston. So that's a good thing if you're moving to Charlotte, North Carolina. The next expense we're going to talk about is transportation, and I'm going to talk about gas in particular. Now, we can see from the table that Charlotte is $3.28 a gallon versus Boston, which is $3.75, so you're already winning in that category. But I wanted to actually go to the pump to see how much it costs, because we know that gas goes up and down all the time. So it is about $3.38 for a gallon of gas here in Charlotte, North Carolina. But that is not the only expense that you have to consider when it comes to transportation. So car insurance, for us, car insurance was less expensive here. And I don't know a whole lot about Boston, and I don't know a whole lot about Oklahoma City in terms of car insurance, but I do know that here for a non-luxury foreign car, you're going to pay about $75 a month versus in New York, you're going to pay about $200 a month. So that right there is a win. And the other thing you need to consider in Charlotte is that you are going to get a vehicle tax imposed every year. And for me, that's about $200, but it could be more than that. It's contingent on, the value of your vehicle, but they use that money to help fix the roads. So that is something that you have to set in your budget because it happens every year at the same time. So it's hard to compare apples and oranges. So I wanted to give you an idea of what it costs to live in each of these cities. So I use the number 70,000 in the cost of living calculators, and I use that number for Charlotte in particular. I use that number because in general, the median income of a household in the United States is about $70,000. So with $70,000, you would need $110,000 to live the same exact way in Boston, and you would need about $60,000 to live the same way in Oklahoma City. The good news is that if you transfer to Charlotte from your job, from your current job, or if you're able to negotiate a higher salary, you can really start to now put those dollars away for savings, for investing, for buying additional properties, for vacations, for whatever it is that you really want to get out of life. Because cost of living is really going to impact how much you can do with your disposable income. So that's the good news. Now, if you are thinking about moving to Charlotte, I want you to plug into bestplaces.net and also Forbes.com, either one you can use, to see what the difference is between living in your city versus this city to see if it makes sense for you to make a move. But I will preface that with the fact that we move for a multitude of reasons. Typically, no one moves for just one thing. We're not moving just for housing. We're not moving just for schools. We're moving for a variety of reasons. So weigh it out if it makes sense to make a move. And if it does, I would love to walk side by side with you for you to secure your home in the Queen City. Thank you for joining me today. We talked about the cost of living in Charlotte and how that might impact you. Now, for my family, moving to Charlotte was a win-win in the category of cost of living, and hopefully it can be for you as well. I'm Yadi Karina Jones with Keller Williams Select in the Charlotte metro area. If you're thinking about selling, buying, relocating, or investing in Charlotte, North Carolina, I'd love to work with you. Text me, call me, email me to the contact information below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you get notifications that I've dropped new videos. Can't wait to see you next time. Thanks again.